Self-esteem is overrated. And I know that sounds spicy, but if you have an open ego center in your human design, you are really not here to have a consistent sense of self-worth or self-esteem. Now, self-worth might be a big life lesson for you when you have an open ego center, but I'm going to propose that trying to build your self-esteem is not an effective strategy for you. And I'll explain why in this video and give you 2 approaches or strategies you can take to feel more inherently valuable, because you are inherently valuable. Now, before I get into it, let me introduce myself. My name is Anna, and I'm an experienced human design reader. I love pumping people up to love their design, even the more challenging aspects like having an open ego center. Now, I should clarify at the top of this video that the ego center in traditional human design language is called the heart center. I just call it the ego center because that's how I learned from my teacher. But if it feels maybe softer to tell yourself that you have an open heart, please, by all means, do that. Also, I am, for simplicity's sake, calling the center open, when what I mean is that it can be open or undefined. Basically, if you're a beginner, just know that when you have a center white on your chart, which the centers are all those shapes on your chart, if it's white, it can be either open or undefined. Undefined, it's going to have gates on it. Open, it's going to have no gates on it. And there are technical differences, but I am not going to go into that in this video. Now, here's an example of Oprah Winfrey's chart, and I've circled the ego center on it. So the ego center is that white triangle on the right side of your chart, and hers is white and hers is completely open because she has no gates on it. So if you have the center open, you are in good company. You and Oprah and 63% of the population has an open ego center. And so most of people are not here to have a consistent sense of self-esteem. And I thought I would quote Oprah herself to really show you how self-esteem isn't something you need to build or gain or accomplish, but rather your value is something to uncover. So this is a quote from Oprah. "You are born with value. It's not something you have to earn, not something someone else can give you. It was stitched into the fabric of your being the moment you took your first breath. But here's the truth. Many of us forget that. We get so caught up in proving ourselves to others, whether it's at work, in our relationships, or even in our friendships." So the biggest lesson with having the center open is not trying to prove your worth to others or the world. You might find that you are constantly taking action out of a sense of inadequacy or not feeling good enough to prove yourself to others. And I'm going to give some examples in a moment. But taking action to prove your worth doesn't work because it takes you further away from yourself. Let's say every time you say yes to something when you really mean no, or when you are not honoring your true desire and doing something that's somebody else's desire or expectation. So my first strategy to uncover your inherent value that Oprah so eloquently talks about is to stop taking action to prove your worth. Stop taking actions to prove that you are good enough. So here are some examples of actions that people with an open ego center can be taking to prove that they're valuable. Let's say you cook dinner for your boyfriend every night so that he thinks you're so valuable he won't leave you. But you're a generator and cooking dinner every night doesn't actually light you up. Or let's say you're a projector and you join the PTA to prove what a good parent you are to the other mommies and daddies, when really you just really don't have the energy after your part-time job to show up for this. Having an open ego center, you could be sleeping with people to feel better about yourself, or you could even partner with somebody who you deem to have clout so you feel to increase your own sense of self-value. And in a more extreme example, and this actually happens a lot, is that People with an open ego center can go on a whole career path just to prove that they're good enough to mommy or daddy, or to their spouse, or to the opposite sex, or whatever gender they're attracted to. Actions that you take to prove your worth are just never going to be correct for you. Again, they're going to take you further away from yourself. So I'm going to offer this affirmation. I have nothing to prove. Say this to yourself all day long. I have nothing to prove, and see if that interrupts that pattern of taking action to prove that you are good enough. Because at the end of the day, you do not have to prove your value. You have nothing to prove when you have the ego center open. In human design, the actions that are aligned for you are always going to come from following your strategy and your authority. That's it. And I suspect that the more you start living as yourself, the more that you'll approve of yourself. And this could be by following your human design or some other internal compass you have to really follow your true self. And I think that's actually a way that we can approve of ourselves more, rather than taking actions to prove ourselves to others, if that makes sense. Some other ways that people with an open ego center can be taken off track, and in human design terminology, this is called acting as your not self, are the following behaviors: competing, comparing yourself with others, making promises that you can't keep, trying to have consistent motivation to, say, diet or exercise or meditate every day. And lastly, to be driven by material gain, or to be famous, or to gain power. Now, there are exceptions to this rule. You might want to get a reading with an experienced human design reader, because let's say you have gate 51 on your open or your undefined ego center, you are here to be competitive. So there's always things that can conflict with this, but generally speaking, these behaviors of competing, comparing yourself to others, trying to achieve, like overachievement, are just not going to be correct for you. So what is the ego center? I probably should have brought this in before. The ego center is one of the energy centers. There's 9 on your chart, and each center governs a certain arena of life, and it just really shows you how to navigate your energy in that arena. So the ego center, as you might have guessed, governs self-esteem, self-worth, feelings of value. It also has to do with material value, like material drive for money, for prestige, for power. And it also has to do with willpower and motivation. So when you have the center open, you might feel a lot of pressure to have consistent motivation, to have consistent willpower, to have consistent self-esteem, but really you are not meant to. And I think there's a lot of pressure in our cultural conditioning that tells you you have to have these things solid to succeed in life. I definitely urge you to question that. From a human design standpoint, when you live as yourself, when you follow your design, that's when you get into alignment for the life that you want. So part of living as yourself is accepting and allowing your self-esteem, your willpower, and your motivation to vacillate. It actually goes against how you're wired to force yourself to be consistent in those areas all the time. So to reiterate, having an open ego center means that your feelings of worthiness and willpower and motivation may vacillate. And what if you just let this be? Like, what if you don't try to fix it? I know that there are a lot of people and podcasts and books and programs out there that are going to tell you you need to have solid self-esteem to have XYZ, or you need to be constantly motivated to succeed in life. But I think having the center open makes you susceptible to getting caught on the hamster wheel of self-improvement. And people can make a lot of money off of that. I know that in the spiritual space, there's a really popular program that equates self-worth as the key to manifesting the life that you want. And I believe that you don't have to be somebody you're not to have the life that you want and the life that you're meant for. It's more about aligning with your true self. And if you have an open ego center, that means allowing and accepting that your self-esteem, feelings of self-worth might vacillate. Correct actions for you from a human design standpoint are always going to be rooted in following your strategy and authority. And you can absolutely succeed in life and have material wealth. I mean, look at Oprah. She is very, very wealthy. I suspect that she is not driven by material gain, because that's not correct for people with the open ego center. But of course, you want to feel good about yourself, and I want you to feel good about yourself. So that's why I proposed the first strategy, which was to let go of actions that you're taking to try to prove yourself to others. And the second strategy I'd propose is to don't make promises you can't keep. Ra Uru Hu, who, I don't know how to say this, he channeled human design. He's the founder of human design. It's a wild story, but he says people with an open heart center, right, the ego center, should never make promises, because you might find that you make a promise and then you don't have the willpower to follow through with that. So if you're making promises and then you don't have the willpower or motivation to follow through, I think you're going to feel worse about yourself. So I would try to maybe under promise, or definitely don't over promise. Another pitfall of having the center open, and I promise I'm going to get to the gifts of this. I should have said at the beginning of the video, like, please watch through to the end, because there's huge gifts from having a center open. But the last pitfall of having the center open is that you might ask for less than you deserve, like in a job, like monetarily, or in a relationship, or think you deserve less happiness that you do, or less love that you do, because of those feelings of inadequacy or not feeling good enough. So one thing you can do, and maybe this will be strategy number 3, is to find somebody in your life who has this center defined. So again, that will be colored in on their chart, and you can run by like, oh, should I ask for this much in this new job? And they'll say, no, you should ask for more. Or like, you could ask them, is it okay to ask for this in my relationship? And I'll be like, yes, of course, ask for that. So that's another thing you can do. And also, if you do feel unmotivated, when you're around people with a defined ego, you'll feel more motivated. So you can totally borrow that energy. Just know that when you're outside of their aura, which is just outside of their energy field, that willpower might fade. But let's say you want to feel motivated to exercise, like go to an exercise class with somebody who has a defined ego, or a lot of exercise instructors, or definitely a lot of motivational speakers have a defined ego. They can really pump people up. I know sometimes when I'm giving a reading, I have to watch at the end of my reading not to give a motivational speech to my clients, especially because I know that if they have an open ego, when they leave their reading, like they might feel really pumped up, but then that motivation, that willpower will just naturally wane. Okay, let's see. I'm kind of getting off track here. Let me have some of this. Okay, so if you have an open ego center, you are not condemned to a life of feeling unworthy. I mean, look at Oprah. She appears to me to have a healthy sense of self-esteem. And I imagine that she learned the lesson around self-worth, that she is inherently valuable, and she probably stopped taking actions to prove her worth to others. That's what she was touching upon in that speech, which I'm going to include down below because it is a really good speech. Wherever you have a center open, you're designed to be the most wise. So it really is your gift to the world. It can show you a clue to your purpose, because open centers draw people's energy to you. So once you kind of go through the journey, the lesson of like, okay, I'm not going to prove myself to other people, I'm not going to overpromise to prove my worth, you might start gaining the wisdom of the center, which is around value, which is around worthiness. So people with open ego centers can really help other people navigate their sense of value and their sense of worth. I know that my friends who have this center open are really good at reflecting my value back to me in a way that feels really accurate. Let's see what else. They can guide people to their heart's desires. So this again is people with an open ego center. Some of the gifts that they carry, that they're wise about who has healthy self-esteem and who doesn't. Like they might see through somebody who's like arrogant as actually like, oh, they're really insecure, and that person has healthy self-esteem. They can also assess who can follow through on their promises and commitments. And if you have this center open, you might find that you are really wise about the use of money and power, as long as you're not caught up in that game yourself. But to arrive at this wisdom, you first need to stop taking actions to prove your value to others. Again, you have nothing to prove. And also just release trying to be better or trying to be more, or trying to be more attractive, achieve more. Your heart is just not built to withstand that kind of pressure. This is actually the best way for you to uncover that inherent value that Oprah says is stitched into the very fabric of your being the moment you took your first breath.